Oh, hello everybody, and welcome to F1 Failcast Podcast Edition. I don't know what that was. Welcome
We still
everyone.
need a theme tune.
We do. I've got my word next to me as well. I could have got a bit bluesy bohemian fun. Welcome for that shambolic introduction. My name is Simeon Smith, and alongside me, as always, our taco friend is coming home. He's coming home. Mr. Esther Ben, how are you doing, sir?
Bueno estende. Tell me, do you like my pace? Do you like it?
I like your pace.
I'm all good, mate. I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this one all week since we had the race last weekend, and I've got all this opinion that's just trying to burst forth. So I'm raring to go. Plus, also, I have to say I'm enjoying our most successful season to date. But I suppose if you do something long enough, then you're bound to become somewhat competent. Like where we are in the drivers right now, I kind of see it as that analogy. If you get enough monkeys with typewriters, eventually one of them will accidentally type Shakespeare. It's kind of like that. It's taken like almost a decade
We got
of
that.
barrier incidents and crashing in the pit lane, but there we are, 5th and 6th.
It's okay. We're going to return there soon because I've done a very quick practice before you got in, and oh dear, I know I'm well known for cutting corners. This is going to be like cutting laps around here. It's awful, and I've been playing too much of. I'm doing a playthrough of a game called Gravel by Milestone. It's terrible. Don't buy it, everyone. And I wished I hadn't. But it's the most floatiest racing game I think I've played probably in 10, 12 years. And so now I'm so used to just having like a massive 4x4 bounce across like it's floating on bubbles instead of going through a desert. I just can't get used to actually having downforce and braking and actually having precision again. So I'm really sorry. My first quali laps are going to be shite.
It's all right, so am I, because I've had a few beers.
Hey! That normally means you win.
Hey! Yeah, that does normally mean I win in a bizarre twist on what would actually happen in real life. The more I have, the better I become. I'm actually quite good around Mexico. I do all right here, actually. I quite like it as well as a circuit, both to watch and to drive in the game. Shall we dive straight in?
Let's do it.
Before we get into the race review, there's a little bit of news that I thought we should maybe cover first, because it's totally separate from the race, and quali is probably a good time to do it.
Okay.
So, we saw this week that look at that! Before we even got out of the menus, we're onto the news. Best improvement. We saw this week that it's been decided to change the aero regs for 2019.
Yes.
And as you will remember, like famously after the Australian Grand Prix, I was with Big Ross on this and said like something has to be done. Since then, my opinion has changed because I think the last few rounds have shown that I would rate this actually as one of the best seasons of recent memory, just because of how close the midfield is. And, you can see that by the fact that we've had a Toro Rosso almost on the podium one week, and then another week Force India get there. Sauber, 1 minute they're at the back, next minute they're up challenging for the medium range of the points. I'm just waiting now for Williams to get like a second out of nowhere, just on one track.
And then never again. Probably Monaco just to throw a fly in the ointment.
Lance Stroll, Monaco winner.
Yeah.
It's up there with Donald Trump, Nobel Peace Prize winner, isn't it? It's just like it could happen, but you sort of never expected it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess I can see where they're coming from, because with the aero package and if they've learnt things and they think things will be better. Whenever I look at things like IndyCar and Formula E, and you look at the way, specifically I'm thinking front wing, the way how that car or those types of cars work, they look angry and aggressive, but they're also quite simple at the front end, and I'm quite happy for them to bring that forward if that then means that cars can play around in the toe. I completely agree that this season has been absolutely superb, but I don't know necessarily if it's always it's circumstance that's brought up the racing and the strategy. And I guess if I was Ross Brawn and in charge, I would bring in those aero packages early, but I'd also mandate a 2-stop strategy on every Grand Prix, and you have to use one of each of the 3 compounds of tyres.
We might have to, actually, because didn't Pirelli say they were aiming to make every race a 2-stop race?
Yeah.
This season, and there hasn't been one, has there? I mean, some people have done 2-stop strategies, but I think every Grand Prix we've had at least a car do it as a 1-stop.
Yeah. And they've all been looking like 1-stop strategies until a safety car pops out, and then the 2-stoppers win. Go in front, mate, because I'm getting used to... And we can get you on the stream.
Thanks, amigo.
And your home tackle town.
I mean, the thing is, like, if you'd asked me, as I said, after Australia, I was all in favour of it, because in Australia, and maybe it was a characteristic of the track, but it really did look like there was some kind of force field around the cars.
Mm-hmm.
And Ross Brawn basically said the same thing, that because of the way they move through the air, there is going to be an effect on the car behind, and it seems to be making overtaking needlessly difficult. And I still think that holds an element of truth, because I think a lot of the overtakes we're seeing now, even though some of them are absolutely stellar, DRS still, over the course of the lap, is playing a role. And it's not that I'm critical of that, because, let's be honest, that's exactly what DRS was for. They realised that following cars was difficult, so they stall the rear wing in an attempt to mitigate it. Now, whether you see that as a I win button or an I overtake button comes down to, whether you're a glass half full or glass half empty kind of person. I'm on the fence about it. My feelings on the DRS are very, very mixed. Because until we can run races twice identically, once with DRS and once without, for sufficient length of time to know what the actual effect is, it's always hard to really gauge. Because one would argue that you still have to have the pace to get within 1 second, so it's not totally nullifying the racing element, but still, horses for courses. But now, given how close everything is, and it does really seem to be the unlimited development on the MGUH, which we didn't have previously, but that seems to be becoming an increasingly important factor in maintaining the dominance of Mercedes and Ferrari works teams. And I feel that leads nowhere good, given that Mercedes are now making overtures that they want like a Haas-like partner to keep their costs down. So I don't know, it's a very tangled web we weave, but I'm trying now to take the viewpoint that Big Ross knows what's best, and I'm at least prepared to see how next year's cars look and how they run before I totally slap it down. But I have to say, I'm a little bit scared now of messing with the magic formula, because if you exclude the top 3 teams, which I know is kind of a self-defeating idea, but if you do, then suddenly you've got a genuinely interesting championship on your hands. And I still think very much Renault could join those top 3 teams before the end of the year.
Yeah. I guess there's also something around, you keep billing the changes as being absolutely superb, etc., etc. What happens if 2019 begins and the first 4 races of the season are quite yawn-worthy? Does that then mean that you've taken a step forward and you need to go back again, or something like that? Oh, rain.
It is difficult to say, actually, because normally I always rail against being reactionary on these things. And making a decision like that after round 1, normally I would consider reactionary, but the fact it came from Ross Brawn and he has no stake in any team right now made me lend it a little bit more weight. And I remember saying to you at the time, actually, like, normally I'd agree with you, but given that Ross was so quick to say, like, no, this is not acceptable, that led me to believe there was a genuine problem. And maybe there is a genuine problem, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the midfield competition too much. Although actually maybe it is. Maybe that's why we're seeing such up and down performance. There's something about the aero formula that's inconsistent across tracks.
Because I wonder as well, because I don't mind a variance in performance and so on, because that keeps things interesting, but I wonder how much is to do with my car works well in a straight line. Hello, Chimpy. I wonder how much of it is to do with cars that are developed so that they work well around others versus cars that can't. Because to me, it still looks like when you are running at the front, obviously you're going to go for performance, and that's why a Mercedes struggles. But and that's why it can't overtake things that are like so many seconds in front. And if you take away that complexity, yes, they might run 0.8 of a second slower, but then they will be able to run better in traffic, which is what a midfield team is going to be probably looking at doing to maximise its effort. So I wonder how much is almost a result of the pursuit of an ever faster car.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the really interesting problems about Formula One in general, right?
Yeah.
That there is no formula that mitigates that problem.
No.
Either your car is good running in clean air, which means it has to be in front, or it loses all performance when it's in traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And Mercedes seem to have very much developed a car designed to lead races, and I think it's coming to bite them in the backside now. Why has the track suddenly got so much faster?
I think it's because it's clouding over because it's going to rain in 15 minutes.
Okay, then I will stay out and do another lap. I've just set the fastest sector 1 without even making an effort to, so...
This track's weird though because I find that if you're not making effort, you can really, really, really find loads of time. Unlike what I'm doing currently at the moment. What else was I going to say on the regulations? The only mild downside that I also see to the changing of regulations is that yet again it's another year where rules and regulations will not be stable, and what does that do? That pulls a field apart in terms of close performance.
And it incurs costs to the smaller teams as well.
Yeah. So I won't expect a midfield that is going to be quite so compact next year. The only good thing about that is that if that then means that... I don't know, you might have to stand in and correct me because I'm talking out my bum-bums. But if those performance and aero packages stuff comes in for 2019, does that then mean that there are no more aero changes before 2021 so that we can get some standard year-on-year stuff?
I actually doubt it, to be honest, because they can always change the regulations as long as it's done before... it's got to be done before the 1st of May, I think. Mm-hmm. If it's done after the 1st of May, then it has to be unanimous, like all teams have to give their assent to the change. But prior to that, the FIA has unilateral control.
Is it worthwhile also then bringing up the point that you said about the unanimous agreement was that actually the teams, when taken on their votes on their own, did not agree and did not want this come through, and that it was a global F1, everyone else that sits on the board that pushed for yes and voted it view and outnumbered the teams?
Yeah, I mean, that's always dangerous as well. I mean, it's a very hard balance to strike, right? Because the teams will always do what's in their best interests. And sometimes that will align with what's good for the fans and the racing, but not very often. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's not as if Formula One management, whether under Liberty or under Bernie, is immune from making, bad ideas, because they do. So I don't know. It's one of those few Formula One issues that I very much fence sit on, because I can understand the practical need to be able to strong arm a change through when teams resist it. But I don't know, we're still in a very interesting period in Formula One in general, not just around rule changes but around the politics, in teams, intra-team and inter-team politics, as well as throughout the sport and all the changes that are going on right now. I mean, little things as well, like next year maybe we have 2 races in the United States, which freaked out enough people actually that Chase Carey had to make a statement saying, like, we know the sports foundations are in Europe, it's just these are growth markets for us, it doesn't mean we're going to neglect them, but there's a very real possibility that we don't have Spa. So like that sends a very mixed message as well. We care about Europe, and then one of the most beloved races on the calendar may get dropped, and and it's not like Monza hasn't been clinging on by its fingernails for half a decade now. So yeah, turbulent times. But shall we talk race? because I thought it was a belter.
Yes, it was. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's so funny though because I still dislike the track, but I do love the race that it provides.
Actually, I was looking back at some of the tweets you and I shared after the last Baku Grand Prix, and at the time, I was very vocal in saying I kind of like the track, but I don't think it's a Formula One track.
Mm-hmm.
And I stand by that because the number of people who, in practice, in qualifying, and in the race, were running off. It just goes to show that maybe the cars are a bit too wide. Maybe I'm too quick to say it's not a Formula One track. I think it's just not suitable for this formula because the cars are just too fat and they're too torquey, and it's such a strange combination of track characteristics as well between sectors 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe that's why it produces such interesting racing, but it just seems to me that it's far too difficult to have a very high attrition rate, and we see that year on year now. However, it seems the Formula 2 cars didn't really have as big a problem, but again, you know, horses for courses. I'm warming to it. Let's put it that way. I'm warming to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix year on year. I mean, it's certainly not as boring as a race at Monaco can be. If all you're interested in is, you know, the overtaking and the wheel-to-wheel action. I still love the Monaco Grand Prix, even though it can be a bit processional, just because a part of the sport for me is the skill of those drivers being able to manhandle the cars around such a obviously inappropriate venue. And you know, it's got such. I see it as like a necessary evil as well. It's such a big factor in funding the sport because, you know, that's where you take the sponsors to woo them, and that's where you get them to open their checkbook. That I think we'll always have to have a Monaco Grand Prix just because you need somewhere glamorous and luxurious and with, you know, pleasant weather 9 times out of 10 and a certain gravitas to be able to woo people to your team.
Yeah. I
Did you see when the rain was coming, by the way?
End of this session.
Okay, so maybe it's worth me going out again.
What was I going to say?
Sorry if I interrupted you.
No. It was I was shocked that on my 6th lap I've just done my fastest. Palmer's just come out the pits and smacked right into Massa, who's now smacked into him. Well done, Palmer. Gone but not forgotten. Made his commentary debut actually on Radio 5 Live with Jack Nichols and co. What was I going to say? Yes. So Chimpy's popped in the chat. How can you hate that circuit? Quite easily is how I'm going to start. It's interesting that the skill comes from. I suppose I'm chucking it in with Valencia in that the skill is precision on a speedy circuit with no get out clause, and if we had gravel traps and stuff still going in modern day circuits, you'd have that everywhere, so it wouldn't necessarily be a factor. I think the track itself is really, really clunky, and yes, that might lead to really great racing, but I do wonder if half of that racing is the fact that you've got a ginormous 1 mile straight with DRS on the top.
Yeah.
Which I feel is a bit overkill. And everyone's just sitting duck. And yes, that's great from lap after lap, but I guess for me it depends on what type of F1 that you want and that you're looking for. I'm very happy to have an Azerbaijan Grand Prix like that once a year. I'd be really unimpressed if every single circuit then had to have a 1 mile straight with DRS in to try and produce the kind of carnage that you would get all the time. I don't know. There's something sterile still about it for me, and I can't put my finger on what.
I do have to say though, I put it up there with Singapore as one of my favourite Grand Prix from a visual standpoint. Austria as well, I like visually. I just think it's a great setting for a race.
With Canada and Mexico and Italy.
Oh god, everyone's coming out of the pits just to ruin my lap. They're all doing it to target me specifically.
They are. We're watching you on board, and there's about 12 cars all coming out together.
And now I'm cutting the corner.
That was beautifully done, though. Nice fly mode moment.
Can I get round again, do you think?
Yeah, you got plenty.
Yeah, 119. Okay, so I won't worry so much about this lap. I didn't really need to come out again, to be honest.
You're just cementing your number one. But it's nice to see you out on track. So,
if this was 1997, some people now would be on very important laps to like try and improve their position or whatever. But I would be Jacques Villeneuve. While you've been doing your laps, Murray would have been watching me put my helmet on in the garage, even though plenty of on-track action was happening.
Exactly.
And then now I'm out. Suddenly, that's the only thing worth commentating on. I love you, Murray, but sometimes 90s coverage was a bit poor.
It was.
But yeah, back on topic. So it's safe to say we've got mixed opinions on the circuit itself and the event. My dispute with it when it came on the calendar was that it took the European Grand Prix title, even though I'm fairly sure it's in Asia.
Yes.
Some people dispute that, but I'm sorry. If it's to the east of most of Turkey and it's south of the Black Sea, I'm pretty sure it's in Asia.
Yeah.
But anyway, geography aside, this lap's already ruined. Thanks, Hulkenberg.
And you got
mug.
rain.
Yeah, never mind. Take you on a tour. That aside,
And yes, that's a place.
Eurasia. More like. Anyway, sorry. Continue on.
God bless Eurasia. No, it's it's safe to say it elicits a mixed response from most fans. So we won't dally too long on that. But I thought as an event, this one was really good because it gives us a lot to talk about as well. Interesting qualifying session. I felt very, very bad for Kimi, and having learned from the last two episodes, I'm not going to dally too long on qualifying because we end up compromising the race review. But I felt very sorry for Kimi, who seemed to be, again, completely dialed in, and I'm loving this version of Kimi.
Yes. Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, and it's just ironic that after we had a conversation about was he really as good as we thought he was,
turns out he might be.
Yeah, he might be. And I lay most of that at the door of Kimi, who seems to have come in with a better attitude than he's had previously. But also, I have to say, Ferrari for my money, that car is the best on the grid. And I know in certain conditions the Mercedes is faster, but it's the same difference as last year for me, that the Ferrari is a better car because it works better in more conditions. And the Mercedes seems to have like a very narrow operating window.
Yeah.
And that's historically never won you championships. And I really think, assuming that Vettel can start finishing races where he should be, because he's had a lot of misfortune lately, I think we are looking at Ferrari constructors, to be honest, unless Mercedes bring an upgrade package to Europe that really turns the tables. Because it seems like, I don't know if they're not using party mode anymore or what, but it seems like they've really gone off the boil in qualifying as well. And Lewis is nowhere, which I think, as much as anything, comes from within his own mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was the big thing for me in qualifying. It was all about Kimi for me. The rest of it really didn't interest me that much.
What about the Toro Rosso moment in qualifying with the Hartley Gasly near miss of Drama Llama?
I actually didn't pick a side in that because I actually laid the blame for that on the race engineers.
For not telling, yeah.
Yeah, they obviously didn't communicate. Like, Brendan was in the wrong place.
Yep.
At least on corner exit, but he did move over to the right-hand side in a way that, people like David Coulthard were saying, well, that's where you would expect him to go, actually, when he's getting out of your way. But it just seemed like a timing thing. And I got the impression that his engineer hadn't said to him, watch out, Pierre's on a fast lap behind you.
Yeah.
But it's also, for me, further proof that Hartley's going to be out of here. Assuming that, assuming Red Bull retain Ricciardo in particular, then Hartley's out, I think. And he's probably out anyway unless they really can't find any drivers. I'd be interested to see if they can actually pull up youth people for Toro Rosso that are of a sufficient level of experience to get their super license.
Yeah, that will be interesting because they've got GP2, GP3 obviously to look at, and a couple of other series maybe as well.
Because there's another Verstappen rule, right? That it's now harder to get your super license.
Yep. Victim of his own success. Into tyres we've got here. The race is dry though, so that's good.
I don't mind so much Inters because Inters are actually my tyre of choice. I seem to perform better on Inters than I do on full wets or dries. So,
baby.
It's going to be dry. Do I wait and
dry for Q3?
I've got a feeling Q3 might actually be wet at the start to try and catch people out.
Yes.
Or either that or Q2 will dry up right at the end. So I'm going to go out now and put a banker in, actually. I was wondering if I should wait and let them dry off the track a bit, but I'll go and put a banker in to make sure I'm through, and then I can always risk it on some dry tyres if the weather seems to clear up.
Oh. Yeah,
for the proverbial biscuit.
Indeed. Not a soggy one. So for me, I think Hartley was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think there was a bit of brain fade from him about where he went, but there was also for me a bit of a indecision from Gasly because he seems to want to go all of the directions all at the same time. So it was just a messy situation, but it did kind of make me go ooh all at once. And I think that's also for me a slight issue with and also I think why I'm slightly worried about the Azerbaijan circuit is that there's so many places around that circuit where you just kind of think, when someone does have that big accident, fuck knows how they're going to
it's coming,
do
isn't
well.
it?
Yeah. And that was the first thing. And when we get into the race, God bless Fernando, but that double puncture going through that fast chicane, if he hadn't have got through there before the field got back round again, that was a car crash waiting to happen as well. So.
I actually thought he was going into the wall, but yeah, we'll talk about that when the time comes.
Yeah.
I agree with you, and the thing is, I'm trying not to be too hard on Gasly because I quite like Brendan Hartley, and I don't like Gasly as like. I don't want to say as a person because I don't know him, but do you know what I mean? He doesn't strike me as a particularly likable driver. But I do appreciate that he is in a very strange position, that he released his greatest hits album on like his third race start of his career, or second race start, and then he's always going to be measured against that benchmark, which may be unattainable. And I think that's leading to him not necessarily overdriving, but I think he's desperate to have some repeat success. And it means that he's getting a bit hot-tempered, such as the race before last, where he collided with Hartley.
Yeah.
And in that instance, I feel he was completely in the wrong, but I know why he did it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that motivated Verstappen, and the reason I'm not tearing him out for it is that it's his first season.
Yeah.
And you're going to do it.
No, I completely agree with that. Although I actually really quite like Gasly. When you speak to him, he's like a little chimpanzee. That sounds awful, but he's like a little hyperactive little midget. It's great.
That's going to end up on the IMDb quotes, and then you'll get a libel lawyer on the phone.
Oh, well then
he's
I can
like
use
a chimp or a midget.
I can use Gasly's own quote back at him and say, what was it he said after he shouted, "Now we can fight," as a retort back to Alonso, and they quoted him on it, and he went, "Oh, it was just a yolk."
It's just a yoke from a midget chimp.
Yeah.
If he'd said that, then you're definitely in the clear.
No foul here, sir. But yeah, apart from that in quali, I wasn't particularly... there was no dramatic, massive surprises for me either, to be fair. It was...
no, I was a little underwhelmed by qualifying, actually. It didn't clue me into how good the race was going to be. And there was nothing in there that I thought seemed hugely out of character. I mean, I'm already used to the midfield being so tight that performance can be quite variable race to race. So, you know, if we'd come out of final practice with, you know, Lance Stroll 5th on merit, it wouldn't necessarily have shocked me back onto my heels. You know, I sort of think, well, they were bound to have one sooner or later because that's how close the midfield is.
Although the Williams' 11th and 12th was nice to see.
Yeah, and they got points, no?
Yep.
So now every team has scored points, which also to me is indicative of a good season.
Yes.
If before the European season has even started, the traditional European season, oh shit, I span. I was up as well.
Now have I. As well.
The track is very strange. I'm normally quite competent on Inters, but it's very, very slippery. I've got to remember, slow to be fast on these conditions. Slow to be fast.
So, and actually that's a good point. So everyone except Sergei Sorokin has scored.
Yeah, and I felt a bit bad for him actually. I think he probably would have scored if he'd finished. Jeff has just told me that I should consider switching to dry tyres.
Jeff is high again.
We're still at odds, Jeff and I. I need a new race engineer in the next game. I keep saying I hope that as the game develops, I don't know how long Cody's going to have the license, I really want them to have race engineers that differ between teams. I think that it's such a small thing to do as well. It's not like it's a technically difficult thing to implement, but it would just really enrich career mode for me. Given that they've taken the time of animating like little animation cutscenes between races where you interact with them, it always seems odd to me that I change teams every year and the same guy follows me round. It's a little bit odd.
He's become your Rob Smedley.
Yeah, exactly. He is my Rob Smedley.
So you're Felipe Massa, baby.
I'd love a Rob Smedley, to be honest. It's nice to see some northern representation in the upper echelons of motorsport. You don't get that very often.
I'd like an angry Asian, please. That would just make me excited.
Well, we lost Divorce Asian Man from our Caterham days.
I know. I did spot a token Asian in my pit crew the other day, but he doesn't pop out very often. And he's only ever on the grid. He's never in the pits.
Yeah. Maybe he got promoted. Anywho, I felt a little bit sorry for Sorokin. I thought his accident wasn't really a fair reflection on him.
No, he's just pensive.
And I feel like he could have done with a good result in Baku just to give him a bit of breathing space from the critics. I don't think his role is necessarily under threat at Williams, given where they are right now.
Nah.
But it's got to be getting into his head a little bit that nobody thinks he's there on merit, except you and me and Andrew Benson. So
that's all that really matters, to be fair.
Yeah, I've got my fingers crossed for him, just because I'm not going to say he's going to come out and blow us all away, but I think he deserves at least a fair hearing, just as any driver in Formula One does. What did you make of Lance Stroll's performance, though? Because I'm still struggling with him. I really rated him when he came in. I wasn't one of the people who said he was only there because of his money, because his junior Formula E record to me looked legit. And he keeps having like occasional flashes where he looks somewhat competent, and then he ruins it by either being a dick in the interview, or just having terrible races where he's nowhere. And I can't figure it out. I mean, it's getting to the point where he's going to have to go, and we'll touch on that in the race, because there was some interesting news this week, which will come up in the race coverage about his future at Williams. But I agree with you that it was encouraging that they were able to tickle the point scoring positions pre-race, and then Lance was able to bring it home for some points. As much as Williams are making a lot of bad decisions right now, and they're not making themselves very likeable, I still have an affection for them, and I don't think any fan wants to see them fail.
No. I feel like they've become for me like that mate that you had at school who's going through that difficult early 20s phase, and then they're going to come back like mature probably as a Reiki practitioner in their 30s, and make YouTube videos.
I've got my yoga instructor certificate.
Yeah, making YouTube videos talking about that difficult time, and now they have sage knowledge and all of that kind of shit. Because it's like rebirth teething problems of a teenager, but like 50 years late. Bizarre. But I guess if you look at Williams, actually, post Patrick Head, post Frank Williams, I guess, to be fair, because how much is he really doing apart from propping up bits? It is teenage time for them, so I guess it is a what do we really want to be, because now they can't live off that name, so how do you readdress that balance and so on and so forth?
Yeah, and as we always say, they're in a strange position given how the company is structured as well.
Yeah.
Given that they're now a group of companies, it's not solely a racing team, and they have shareholders, and it's publicly traded, so they've got to worry about, financial projections and results and things like that. It puts them in a very difficult position to be a classic privateer team. They're sort of somewhere between now, sort of worst of both worlds, actually.
A bit like someone on Twitter today when the person called Ellie put out that they was looking for a job as a chiptune artist, and here's some of their stuff, and I retweeted some of her work, and I'd put she's good, and she replied with they're good, not she, but thanks. And I thought, okay, reminds me of that, not quite one or the other.
I'm waiting for that to phase out, to be honest. Controversial opinion, but it feels like a needless political statement, and it's just everybody talking about themselves.
Yes,
that's what I've noticed. Like, there's not actually some group that these people represent. It's just everybody talking about themselves. It's really bizarre. Apparently, it's getting faster out there, and the track conditions are only damp. I don't know if that means it's time to change to dries. Do you know what? I might risk it. I mean, what have I got to lose?
Well, I'm 10th anyway, so I'm a bit buggered. They're going out on Inters. I've just seen a Red Bull and Mercedes go through, but it reckons the tyres are 4 seconds slower.
I am going out on some super softs, and all I've got to do is make sure I don't bin it. Like, I'll just do a very slow lap if it's wrong. If it's definitely the wrong tyre, then no worries. But I've just got a feeling that there's some cars in the garage now that are going to go out on ultras at the at the last possible moment.
Yeah, Carlos
to get a
Sainz
flying
has
lap
gone out
done.
on ultras.
Yeah, called it.
So I'm going to go for supers because I don't want to go on ultras.
No. But also, people who've just gone out on Inters are now completely buggered. And we're going to see a really mixed up grid, which I love, actually, when this happens. I think Hamilton's out on track as well, so he could actually end up being out by the time... Yeah, the tyres already feel better. It really must have just switched this moment. I tell you what, though. This is the first game where I've got really good at knowing when to change tyres, regardless of what the race engineer tells me. In my career mode as well, I've started to get a really good knack for it, which I've never had before, because anyone who's watched this podcast over the previous years we've done it knows that if anyone's going to bugger up the strategy, it's going to be me.
You do love an alternate strategy.
I've done it so many times, like, stop being funny. But now, I'm, comes with age and experience, I guess, comes good tyre choice. So, let's get into the race already, because there's still a lot of Formula 1 news to cover, and qualifying didn't really deliver up much to talk about. Now, given so much happened to affect the winner's result, I'm sort of wondering if we shouldn't do a reverse and talk about, like, the DNFs first, or what? Because also that means talking about Red Bull, and I didn't want to talk about them until we were in the race either, so maybe we'll talk about some other moments. I tell you what we can do, actually. I want to talk Haas really quick.
Okay.
Very disappointing weekend for them, and that means we're not talking about the race in any semblance of order. But whatever, everyone knows how it finished. Not a great weekend for them. What I found particularly interesting is that they were berating both drivers, which another team did as well. but yeah, they were not happy with either driver, which seemed kind of odd given the magnitude of difference between one's bad performance and the other's bad performance. And I feel we should talk about that. One last addendum before we do, though, is I have to start calling out mainstream Formula One coverage now, because it's getting to the point now where people, I'm sure they're copying us. I'm sure people watch the replay now, because some of our references have already been stolen, looking at you, David Coulthard, but now people have started making cookbook jokes about Romain Grosjean.
No!
On TV, podcasts, radio, I'm like, no, you can't benefit from this. Because that means, my fantastic Romain Grosjean cookbook joke that I laugh at myself is lost to history. So I'm a little bit bitter. Nevertheless, he managed to bin it under safety car conditions, the classic Grosjean.
And it is classic Grosjean, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then
it's full-on classic Grosjean.
And then angered that it was Ericsson that had hit him off. How did that come about? No idea.
Yeah, I mean, that just shows how completely unaware he was, because Ericsson was something like 8 car lengths behind him. It did deliver some great memes, though, on the internet that I enjoyed immensely. I sent you one, right, with the guy shooting the guy in the chair and then asking why Marcus Ericsson would do it.
Yeah.
Let me go on board with you. I hope you make it through, mate.
I've got into 7th. That was an awful lap. I completely missed turn 1. But apparently it's given me 7th. Great. Ruined my tyre.
Who's out? I didn't get a chance to see. There's going to be some big casualties. Oh, no. Good.
Oh, he's the only one?
The rest kind of scraped through, didn't they? That's a little bit depressing.
Oh, well. The main
and Raikkonen got out on ultras. Not too shabby. But yeah, they talked about why Grosjean went into the wall, and apparently his excuse was, after initially saying that Ericsson hit him, despite being nowhere near him, he said that his steering wheel is like a weird shape for the size of hands he's got, and that he knocked a bunch of switches and buttons.
What?
And I really don't think that holds up as an excuse on the level that he thinks it does. Because if I was Gene Haas, I'd be like, that is the opposite of an excuse. It's basically saying, I am such a clown that I just pressed all the buttons and then binned it. I mean, it doesn't make you look good.
Because wasn't it that he'd left some kind of brake thing in the wrong position or something, so that it skewed him off in a weird direction or something? A bit like leaving the handbrake on.
Yeah, but I mean, that struck me as a little bit weird as well, because it didn't look like he was braking initially.
No.
When he started to, when the inevitable was arriving. So it struck me as very, very odd, but you never know, maybe there's some little gizmo that affects the braking, or maybe it's something to do with how the power's deployed or something. But yeah, it just a very odd accident, but strangely one that I could see happening before it actually broke away from him. I don't know why. I just had a feeling it was like the incident with Verstappen and Ricciardo, actually, that I called about 15 laps before it happened.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I imagine everybody with eyes called that before it happened.
Yeah.
It just struck me. It struck me as a little bit odd. That I could just tell, like, he's about to bin this, and it was just so poetic that they were on board with him at the time on the coverage I was watching. So I got to watch it live.
Oh, superb. We didn't.
Yeah, phenomenal. He's got to be fired. We've said this, or I've said this the last 3 episodes, but he's got to be fired now, surely. I don't know who they'll replace him with. Maybe Perez, but
Kimi.
Or Kimi. I actually, if Kimi wasn't driving as well as he is this year, and Haas got out the checkbook, I could have actually seen Kimi at Haas. It seems like a good place for a driver to go before they're put out to pasture, but he's got to be out. I mean, he must be losing the faith of the team because he also did a Gutierrez. Did you see him throwing his gloves
Yep.
at someone in the team? And it was like, why is it his fault? Why? I mean,
It's always everyone but him. And now, have you noticed on the radio, instead of him being the brakes, it now starts with I'm sorry, but the brakes, because he no longer feels like he can command. I think that kind of respect because his results don't back it up. You can only be a tool to everyone and still have everyone rally round you if you can deliver those results. And it's not him that's doing it; it's K-Mag.
it
Who's
seems
bringing
like
the
his.
points.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like his Haas career is kind of cruising on those early good results.
Yes, absolutely. Because if that was probably Ericsson goes into the wall, there would be no one would have. Everyone would have shouted, "Oh, you beat me! Oh, Hamilton beat both." Go
What a
again.
bastard.
Yeah, you kind of, I don't know. Let me start that again because I had two thoughts pop in my head at the same time and I just seemed to have a meltdown. It struck me that this is his 10th year in Formula One.
Yeah, he's been around the block.
How the hell does someone in their 10th year in Formula One drop it under the safety car? And is there precedent for that?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I forgot that delicious irony. That actually makes it so much better. That actually improves it for me, if anything. Yeah, I agree, and also I think it was quite easy for him to look good when he was compared to Esteban Gutierrez, who some people still rate, but he never dinged my bell. And it's kind of like saying, well, I got great results compared to this dog in a novelty hat. And it's like, well, yeah, you're beating your teammate, but your teammate is a dog in a novelty hat. It doesn't count.
Mm. Nice.
Do I have a spare set of Ultra Softs? I think I do. I don't know if I've got enough time to get round and get out again, but maybe. It's a short session, Q3.
Yes. Yeah, I just... Because when I look back at his career, trashed by Alonso, admittedly in a Renault that looked awful and was horrible.
It was a crap car.
It was an awful car. And he wasn't, like, terrible, because he'd done better than Piquet, which I suppose isn't saying very much, but yeah.
A driver famous for binning it.
Yes! Then came in, trashed in general initially by Raikkonen, came up to have some good, respectable results. Moves to Haas, has El Mexicano to deal with, doesn't do particularly well. Does particularly well. But then K-Mags is the first one who isn't out of Formula One, who's like a proper benchmark, I guess, in a while. And I've been a bit like meh over him for some time. And I just wonder how much more money he asks for, how much more stropping around that he does. And when you've got that kind of inter-team battle, you need to play nice. And Americans love K-Mag because did you see about all of his comments before the weekend where he was saying, I would give my life on the line for this. I'm prepared to die for an overtake and things like this. And then he went and proved that by ramming poor Gasly off into the wall, thus triggering carnage, which then done a certain puncture with the stuff afterwards. And Americans love that shit. So no wonder they're all gravitating towards him. But it's interesting, if Roman does go out, I wouldn't know who to put in to replace him, because they wouldn't do their other guy, would they?
No, actually they might take Giovinazzi, but yeah, that's the one seat that were it to become vacant, I'd really struggle to see who would get it. But I mean, I'm almost certain it will be vacant now. I think K-Mags is ready to step up and lead the team. He might need to, once he's in that position, cool it a little bit.
Yeah.
but I do think he has really come on song, and I've been super impressed with him. I'm enjoying watching him drive. I'm enjoying watching him enjoying driving.
Yeah, I still think he's dirty.
He's in the right team at the right time. And, if only we could get that up and down the grid, you'd have some fantastic racing. It just, yeah, I think it's as good a place for him to be. And I could see him, if he can maintain this standard, I could see him bouncing back and delivering on the promise that he was supposed to have when he entered the sport. When he was supposed to be McLaren's next big thing. Mm-hmm. Which, if anything, McLaren seemed to be struggling in finding the next big thing. So, yeah, I'm very pleased to see him doing well. I'm enjoying his driving, and he's one of the cockier drivers that I can just about tolerate. Because, with him it seems less braggadocious and more like I'm refusing to be intimidated, and that's very different. It's not like petulance. It's more sort of I'm here to do my job, and I'm not going to be psyched out doing it, and I can respect that a lot more.
Yeah, you're right. There is a different way how he goes about it, and I think that comes from that McLaren year where he went to McLaren. He showed very, very well, I think, against Button over the course of the season. Was given shit and dropped. Goes to Renault. They treat everyone in that year like poo. Yeah. Doesn't get any love whatsoever. Trashes his teammate, and then gets told that he's still not good enough and we don't want you really anyway. So that kind of... No wonder you'd come in with a bit of a chip on your shoulder and have to be formed mentally for your third different team in 3 seasons, that someone's going to love you eventually. So you're going to have to look out for yourself.
It does show some tenacity and fortitude, actually, when you do think about his career in those terms. That makes it very respectable, actually.
Yeah, because in some ways, a lot of people were saying, like, ooh, third team in 3 years. Mm-hmm. But actually, you've done pretty damn well to still be in F1 for 3 teams in 3 years and make that work.
Yeah, to make it work for you in particular, I think, is key there, because it's not like it's a vote of confidence, but I agree. The thing for me is that he should never have been dropped from McLaren. At the time, like, I didn't want Button to lose his seat. I wanted to see him in a McLaren Honda, just because I have a fondness for Button. But, like, if I had my pragmatic head on, I would have let Button retire then, because that was the last year he was able to be even remotely competitive, and I would have had K-Mag's team with Alonso, groom K-Mags to be the new team leader, and build the car for him as much as anything. And then, maybe you'd have someone like Van Dorn or Norris come in a few years later to replace Alonso. And I did feel at the time it was a little unfair to Kevin that he was dropped after putting in what I thought was a respectable performance, and given that he had some races with very strange problems. Do you remember that time his car was super overheated and he actually ended up with, was it 2nd-degree burns or something? It was like really bad burns on his legs.
Oh, I can't remember that.
Yeah, his car had been burning him all the way round. There was like an electrical short or something, and it was heating up some of the bodywork near him. And he drove through it.
Amazing.
I've really fluffed this lap. Can I get over the line for one more? Yeah. Where are you, amigo?
I am P4. You've got the legs on me, specifically in sectors 2 and 3. We're equal in 1.
I'm not a huge fan of sector 3 here, but it seems that I have it dialed in, so that's good. Also, I really like my setup. I actually spent more time on this setup than I did tweaking any other. I tend to do what you do as well, actually, which is try and find one now rather than formulating it entirely myself. But then I still do tweak it because everyone's got like a little bit of time to find with a small adjustment. And also, if you're driving on pad, most people who take time to actually formulate setups. They do it for a wheel, and you can gain a little bit. But yeah, 10 out of 10 for K-Mags over the season, to be honest. But it was a disappointing weekend for Haas. But they would due another one, to be honest. And I still find it hard to place their car. I'm still seeing articles come out saying that their car is great, but I'm still thinking it looks very up and down, to be honest, just like all the others.
I found the James Allen on F1 article really interesting this week about Haas, where they were basically saying how many points have this team lost and how much is this going to affect them for the rest of the year, because it's of James Allen's opinion that they're already starting to slide down the pecking order, and their big opportunities, as we were saying at the beginning, are already gone. So for every technical problem, for every Romain Grosjean brain fade, for every cookbook that he was busy in the kitchen having a go for, how much have they lost? How much money does that then translate into? And it was quite interesting to see it all kind of tot up over time. So yeah,
yeah, it's not going to help Gene feel confident staying.
No, exactly.
So let's continue with our disordered race review, I suppose. We'll now. Why don't we try and talk about the race as it happened rather than going by finishing? We'll figure out the format one day, everybody.
Keep on his toes.
So straight from the off, I thought it was a very entertaining race. I was particularly encouraged by Hulkenberg and Sainz. I think the Renault was looking phenomenal. And the fact that very early in the race we were treated to that delicious morsel of Sainz overtaking Verstappen on merit.
Yes!
Just by being better. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it was on merit, but also convincingly done, cleanly done, and then the pull away
after a battle.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is so. I hope it's the first of a bit of a just desserts, and that we do see Renault come closer. And I agree with you how I think they're going to progress and join onto Red Bull's tails mid-season, I reckon, for a good second half. But it was great to see Sainz ahead of Hulkenberg and feeling much more confident with the car. I really wish that their strategy hadn't then gone a bit clunky towards the end with Sainz, because they went to the soft tyres too early and that threw him off. But no, great to see that happen. And yeah, just nice to have a bit of mix in those top teams.
Absolutely. I've got my first pole position on merit.
Woo!
This is my first ever pole since we've been doing this podcast. All this season I've been close, and Hamilton always pips me by like 0.08 of a second. But not this time.
Nice.
Beaten by 2/10. I'm really pleased with that. I don't know how I did it, but I'm delighted.
I'm pleased and delighted, and I think we need to celebrate that with some drink later.
I felt a little bit... Well, I felt a lot bad for Sainz, actually, because I think Renault really compromised him on strategy.
Yeah. It looked right at the time, didn't it? But then it quickly all kind of went a bit wrong when we realised that those tyres were
it really goes to show how important this stuff is, because for my money, it was just that he pitted one lap too late. If he'd come in a lap earlier, he would have been golden. Your mic is cutting out, mate.
Is it?
It sounded like, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, I think I was umming. Sorry.
All right. I might tweak my strategies a little bit.
I'm tweaking mine.
Might see if I can't finish on the ultras. Actually, apparently it's 1.5 seconds slower, but for some reason I don't believe that.
My projected race... Why does it want to... I don't believe it. It reckons what I want to do is 12 seconds slower, and it's so not.
I think these projections are always wrong if you're not in career mode and you haven't done the race strategy thing. Because that looks at how you drive and then does a calculation. And this, I think, is a purely theoretical. But apparently, just changing which tyres I'm on when cost me 1.3 seconds over the race distance. And it's the same strategy. I'm just swapping 2 stints around, and I just don't see how that's possible. If anything, it should be faster, because finishing the race on the faster tyre with a lighter car, it should gain you time.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like. But fine, I'll do things your way, Jeff, with your lack of imagination. No, I absolutely loved it. I want to see Renault do well. I was heartbroken for Hulkenberg that he was out again in Baku, but I was also heartened to see Cyril Abiteboul immediately leap to his defence, saying, "Well, let's be honest. He's only made one mistake all year, and he only made one mistake last year. So, what was it? His words were, he's more than forgiven for it," which I think is exactly what he could have done to here, because he's very hard on himself. That's a lot of post race commentary on that. People who know him say he's very hard on himself when he messes up. So I think it's good that the team moved to reassure him, and I think they're onto a winner with him at the moment. I think that's a relationship that is so beneficial for both of them.
Yeah.
But the only thing that gave me mixed feelings about seeing Sainz do so amazing was that every overtake he makes on a Red Bull car is another link in the chain that's going to pull him back there to be Verstappen's bitch.
I know what you mean.
The better he drives now, the more chance that out of spite, being forced to move to Honda, Red Bull will drag him back into the pits. And I actually think that it'll be Sainz Verstappen at Red Bull next year. Now I hear myself say it out loud, because it does look like it is going to be Red Bull Honda next year. They're already having negotiations. They're having second round negotiations in Spain. They hate Renault and Renault hate them. I don't see why they would do Renault any favours at all by allowing them to keep Sainz when Sainz is being competitive and Renault are also looking more competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that heartbreaking? Haven't I just depressed all of us?
Yeah. Thanks. I guess the only, and I mean only, thing that would be really interesting is that if Sainz goes to Red Bull and keeps outperforming Verstappen, and then they have to keep on finding new ways of keeping him behind, because I think I find that quite fascinating, because for me that was the big story of the race in Azerbaijan, that wasn't necessarily brought out on the track as a big thing, was how the Red Bull team kept Ricciardo behind Verstappen no matter what was going on. And we'll come to that when we do the Red Bulls, but they're going to have to get creative with that with Sainz, because we saw them side by side battling for positions all the time, and Sainz was easily Verstappen's equal at Toro Rosso, so they'd have to do the same if he went there as well.
Yeah, I think they really damaged themselves by taking this stance. Like, you look at Ferrari or Mercedes and you can... I wouldn't agree with it, but you can make a compelling argument that you have a favoured driver and you divert a bit more attention and resources and favouritism their way because they're the ones bringing the big results.
Yep.
But when you look at Red Bull, particularly given points on the board the last few years, I think it's very, very stupid to start treating it like a one-car entry. And I think they're going to end up really damaging their long-term prospects by pissing off drivers of the calibre of Ricciardo and Sainz. I'm so slow off the line in this version of the game. Oh, you cheeky rascal!
Hello!
You got down the inside there.
I don't know, a bit of a sneak.
So did Bottas. You were literally the last person I was expecting to see, and that's not out of disrespect or anything at all. It's just, you were nowhere when I went into the corner. I couldn't see you, and then suddenly, hello!
Oh, hello!
And you're on the harder compound tyre as well, which makes it all the more impressive, because I was so sluggish off the line with this tyre.
I am not good, though. As you can see, I'm struggling. Struggle. Right.
The connection's really bad today. The mic quality is just dropped, and I keep getting like disconnection warnings above all the cars. So I think it's my internet that's the problem.
Yeah, I can hear you crackling and struggling.
I sound like I'm underwater, right?
Yeah, it keeps cutting in and out, like you've got a faulty headphone jack, but we know you haven't.
Well, we'll try and carry on as best we can. Hopefully, it doesn't drop.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move onwards and upwards. Then why don't we actually talk Red Bull since we're kind of there already, and we can sort of Bottas. He span behind you and just went straight in front of me.
I didn't feel like I hit him. Maybe
You
he went
didn't
out
hit
in
him.
avoidance.
You didn't hit him, but I went like I was going in a straight line. I went into his side pod.
Oh, okay.
Looks like I'm on a recovery drive like last week now because I'm going to have to pit. My front wing is orange.
Oh no.
It was such a small thing for me. I actually saved him, to be honest. He should be thanking me because he would have spun round all the way, but I kind of nudged him back right. But I'm doing you a favour now. I'm holding up Raikkonen and everything, and hopefully that means you've got a bit of breathing room and you only have to worry about Bottas. But I'm now on a compromised strategy. I'm on super soft, which kind of sucks.
Ugh.
But yeah, let's talk Red Bull. Now, obviously, those two had some very colourful and interesting battles all the way through. A few close calls, and yet they still show a stubborn reluctance. And I know they say it for the fans, you know, to say we allow our cars to race and so on. And some people are grateful for that, but they're also a business and a racing team, and it was completely clear that Ricciardo was massively faster. Like, if it was just comparable pace, then fine. You know, let them race and may the best man win. But when one of your cars is clearly faster, as we saw from when he actually got round him and he opened up half a second in a lap, at that point all you're doing is cost yourself points needlessly. And his defensive driving is too much, and I'm a little bit annoyed actually that the Verstappen rule was rescinded this year, because we saw in this race exactly why we had that rule previously about moving more than once into the braking zone.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it made for some entertaining television, and I don't want to like totally poo-poo the whole thing. It didn't make for a very watchable race, but the entire way through, I had this feeling that it was just going to end in tears, and of course, inevitably, it did. Before we talk the actual crash, what did you make of the battle between them? I mean,
I thought
were there any particular moves that stuck out to you?
So the one where they banged wheels coming out from turn one, where Ricciardo went round the outside, I thought was a really, really interesting move, because it was right on the limit, and that would have been the point where I'd have said, settle down, no more battling, sort yourselves out, let each other go, because they'd already banged wheels once. So from a team boss perspective, that would have been my limit personally. But yeah, it was interesting because you've got one of the most aggressive defenders against one of the most aggressive overtakers, and it was great to see the different logic, I guess, of everything and how they were kind of pitting themselves against each other. So I found it quite fascinating. I did think though that if they thought that they had a car that could win that race, that it was all a bit pointless and they should have just let Ricciardo go, especially since they should be playing the team game for the wins where they can get them. Because they're not out of that championship, are they? I don't think.
No, not really. And if they got a double points haul there, particularly if one of them had been on the podium, it was all to play for. I find it very disappointing, actually, and it was odd that they complain about the end result, but after Ricciardo pitted and Verstappen came out in front of him through some sorcery, that the race engineer immediately said, right, we'll just do it again. And I kind of, at the time, I kind of thought, under what authority are you giving that instruction? Because I'm pretty sure that Christian Horner's nervous ankle is probably in strong disagreement. And, you know, why they didn't move Max out of the way, I don't know. But all they did was hurt themselves. I agree with you about the battle, though. It was very interesting. And I think for me, actually, even though it took him a long time to get by, it showed the class, again, of Ricciardo as an overtaker. That sort of almost lateral thinking and, you know, the psychology of him lining up a move, you know, the dummy and then the dive and so on. Mm-hmm. I still think he's, for my money, the best overtaker in the field by not an insignificant margin. I genuinely rate him above, I think, everybody else, actually. So I kind of felt I enjoyed being treated to that sort of semi-masterclass, but by the same measure, I don't feel that it was very early in the exchange that Verstappen's driving went from being defensive to being reckless.
Yeah.
And there was times that Ricciardo got by on merit and Verstappen just sort of dive-bombed him down the inside.
Particularly the one into turn 2 where that was a you're going in the wall or not.
Yes. Yeah, and Ricciardo had to back out, right?
Yeah. Oh, Christ.
Yeah, that actually annoyed me because I remember there was another overtake as well where, like, Ricciardo got directly in front of him completely, and then Max sort of moved out and went on the attack immediately. And at the time I was thinking, what is the best you're hoping for here? The longer you're battling with him, the slower your ultimate race pace is going to be, and he's going to get by you eventually.
Yep.
That I don't know what the advantage is, and it shows that sort of mentality that he has that we're always talking about and criticising, you know, that sort of almost like a video game mentality, where it's something someone would do in a video game. Like, if you qualify out of position in this game, I've watched a few people streaming Formula 1 2017, actually, and you see it quite a bit. People with a massive train behind them, and they're sort of weaving and, like, diving back on people. And you think, you do realise that this is just going to make you look slower than you are. It's amazing, actually, how many people come into the game first time. Because I think it's very interesting to watch new players come into the franchise and assume they should be winning straight out of the gate. Because it is a little counterintuitive, I suppose, if you're not familiar with the sport. But without digressing too much, it just struck me of the same mentality. Like, he was looking only about salvaging the best possible finishing position rather than realising that he could also achieve the best possible finishing position over race distance by driving for pace rather than position. And again, it's that, you know, marathon, not a sprint. It's like a game of chess kind of element to it.
Yeah.
Verline, we have this dalliance every week. We dance this romantic tango, and you nearly take me out every time when we're fighting for 19th position, and I just think it's unnecessary. Enjoy DTM. With your ridiculous hair. So, yeah, I think we're both in agreement that we would have told them to cool it. Talking about the incident itself, at the time, I found myself unable to entirely pin it on Max. At the time, I thought that maybe Ricciardo had got a bit too frustrated, and, you know, it just... I thought it was as much his fault as Max's, if not a little bit more his, actually. But then, when I actually watched the replay a bit more and I saw the moves Max was making into the corners, I was a little bit less critical, and that just gradually snowballed, actually. The next thing was the realisation that I shared with you on Twitter that the entire accident would have been irrelevant if Max hadn't been so petulant early in the race anyway.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been anywhere near each other. And then the other factor was Ross Brawn again. And this came out late in the week. It wasn't like in the immediate aftermath of the race, but it sort of was a tangential question in an interview, and he said 100% Ricardo was a passenger in that accident.
Yeah, that was what you said. Yeah.
He said, like, because of the way the aerodynamics works on these cars, like, to say both drivers are equally responsible is inaccurate, and that once Daniel committed to the move and Max moves in on him, there's not really much Daniel could have done. And Niki Lauda said something very similar, and but he was more blunt in the fact that he said the words "Red Bull favours Max Verstappen."
Yeah.
What I was a little bit surprised and yet impressed by was Ricardo and his reaction. That he sort of said, "Yeah, my fault too," and didn't make a scene about it. And I don't know why that is. Some people were speculating it's because he's got a big fat contract for Ferrari in his inbox.
Yeah.
But he remained very cool-headed for someone who'd had a podium taken away from them, in my opinion. And for someone who had been in a battle he was clearly capable of winning and subject to some very questionable defensive driving, to then have that accident happen after being actively encouraged by the team to try and overtake Max, knowing how Max drives, for him to then say, yeah, if they want to blame me, that's fine. Actually, I blame myself a little bit too. I don't know where that reaction comes from. I think it's an admirable reaction. It's very humble. But I don't know where it comes from because it doesn't seem logical to me. I mean, I wouldn't want to see him being a dick. I don't think that helps.
No.
But to take blame where really there's a very strong argument you did nothing wrong, that's unusual. And you could also see it as a reflection of the fact he doesn't have a fat Ferrari contract in his inbox, and he's aware that maybe he needs to stay, but it seemed like a very political reaction. And that's unlike him, actually. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But yeah. Very weird things are afoot at Red Bull. I think they're in for a turbulent season and possibly a beyond disappointing period up until 2021, and whether they have the stamina to stay in the sport that long, I don't know. What do you reckon? I mean, is it perhaps that Verstappen is getting reprimanded behind the scenes, but the team won't do it publicly? I mean,
I think there is some of that. I think there's also Ricardo needs to hedge his bets because he doesn't necessarily know where he's at yet. And if he does know where he is at yet, then that's going to go wrong. Oh, we've had a Bottas moment. Yeah, if it's all going to go horribly wrong, then that kind of PR of I took it humbly and I did really well and look at me, I'm going to apologise to the team, that's the kind of thing that like no one's going to argue with for being the upper person. I also think that it was the first time that Verstappen looked, I think, a little bit sheepish as well, which was lovely. Not sheepish enough, if you ask me, but then we kind of know my feelings on him anyway.
I didn't actually see him post-race, so any detail you've got there is helpful, actually. Because I didn't see him, I didn't hear a comment. Normally, like, you know, either he tweets something stupid or he's, you know, in an interview saying that, you know, he is the reincarnation of Senna and everyone else is wrong. But I didn't get any of that this time, and I didn't know what his reaction actually was.
No, it was all about wanting to apologise to the team and that it's a team sport and that teams should be come first and that we need to go and apologise to the team, all of that kind of stuff. So clearly well briefed beforehand.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting one because it's... not very often that he's at least vaguely humble. So I was glad that he was to a degree, but the whole thing for me, and K-Mag was just as bad, I think, with what he did, and to a lesser extent Ocon perhaps, is driving like the other person isn't there, or doing more than what is quote unquote gentlemanly respectful. And the problem with that Verstappen rule was that it was always a gentleman's rule that you only move the once, you can't weave, this, that and the other. It came into effect, then there was an actual penalty and a reason for having that rule in place, because there would be consequences. Now that it's gone again and no one seems to, racing is back being fair game, we're just going to have more of that. And I think that will spill out across Red Bull throughout the rest of this year. I think that will be the start of a Rosberg-Hamilton style relationship, because they've been quite friendly on camera, at least, and they come across as actually a couple of guys that, when they aren't next to each other on track, probably get on not too badly. But
apparently they're neighbours. They live in the same apartment block. And I always voluntarily, and it does seem they at least did have a good relationship. And I always put that down to the fact that Ricciardo was sort of quietly confident that he was more experienced and senior somehow, and that Max was just like a puppy yapping at his heels a little bit. I think that's gradually starting to change. And Hungary last year was certainly a turning point in the relationship. I don't think the rift has ever totally gone away. But I think almost certainly, as Red Bull continue to favour Verstappen, it's becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger factor. And my hope is that Ricciardo gets out of Red Bull, but I'm not entirely convinced that he will. Not 100% anyway. What I find particularly interesting about this whole thing, though, is if you look at Verstappen's record last year and this year, you have to say, if it was any other driver at any other team, they'd be out.
It's Maldonado-like. There's that thing that I shared, or you shared. I can't remember who it was. One of us.
I sent you the graphic, right?
It was you. Yeah, that gives you Crash's percentage of. I can't remember who it was the first one.
It was Ricciardo, Maldonado and Verstappen, yeah.
Yeah. And it's all a little bit too close for comfort between a certain Maldonado and Verstappen. And one's
and
a meme.
It was an adjusted statistic, because it adjusted the statistic for crashes that were solely their fault. So, like, if when you've been taken out by someone and it wasn't your fault, those were actually discounted. It says in the notes,
right?
Or it's like an engine failure or something. So, with the adjusted statistic, Verstappen crashes out of through his own hubris 15% of the races he starts.
That's not good.
No. And Ricciardo's figure was like 2.2%, something like that, and Maldonado was 20%, or like 18.8, something like that. So the difference between them, given the lengths of career, is getting comparable now. It's not good. It's not good. And
if that was anyone else, you're right. They would be dragged over the coals, they would be a meme, they would be out. They wouldn't have an army of fans defending them and saying, oh, he's a world-class driver. Maldonado was fast. He won a race for Williams in a car that other people couldn't do dog poo with. But he was out on his ear because he crashed all the time. And he became internet's favourite meme. And I don't see how this is any different. And again, I guess it pulls back to this whole Verstappen's learning his craft, blah, 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 blah. He's young. Too late. You graduated young. This is now your 4th season?
Yeah.
Beyond learning now, mate. Sorry, you're in it with the tough boys. And if he can't handle it, then he needs to go. Now, we know it will never happen. But, I'm impressed.
The thing is, like, from where we are today, it looks like it would never happen. But, I mean, Red Bull is still Red Bull, and it's still pretty merciless. I get the feeling that maybe it's slowly starting to change a little, possibly. Yeah. Just from the fact that how you describe Verstappen's reaction and the fact that Helmut Marko is at every race now.
Yeah.
And given, they seem to have high hopes for Gasly, they've got signs in the back pocket. But I think also they're aware that if they did drop him, someone else would sweep in. It's a very strange thing. Like, how long can a driver who's not been in the sport even 5 years trade on his reputation that he hasn't really earned? It's a very anomalous case, actually, isn't it? Like, I don't think I recall that ever happening with any other driver.
No, it's such a projectical. I know the word I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean. Thing where you kind of think, right, well, because if Michael Schumacher, who is the most recent wonder kid, because Vettel, I guess you could include that as well. If Vettel spent his 2011 season, but then he's already world champion, so it's kind of it's null and void. Who would be a good example? Jenson Button spent his entire 2004 or 2005 season crashing out of the first 4 races, essentially, causing problems, being a drama, still no points on the board, looking a dick in general. You wouldn't have a team still going for it. I don't think. I don't know.
No, I mean, and particularly this year with the midfield being so tight, it's even more costly than usual, because last year you could make some level of argument that as long as the Red Bulls finished, 4th, 5th was entirely possible, or 5th, 6th, so they had enough performance in the back pocket that they had a better than average chance of finishing in a good position as long as they finished. So they could afford to let the drivers race and risk the chance of dropping points at one race, because they'd always have that somewhat built-in advantage, and they were in a position that if any of the big teams dropped the ball, then they could pick it up and run with it. This year, I mean, while they have won a race in China, I don't think they have that luxury anymore, and particularly with Renault breathing down their neck, they just don't have that luxury, and the cars all seem very variable in performance, race on race. That I was surprised how uncompetitive Red Bull looked in Baku. Who knows how many more races they're going to have like that? And that means to me that they have to grab the bull by the horns. But, I mean, they literally have to, because every time this happens, it costs points and money beyond what they can afford to leave on the table. But when they call time, gentlemen, please on that contract, I don't know. But I mean, does anyone really now believe he's going to turn this around? Because it just seems innate to his character.
It's almost like an attribute that you're going to have to put up with. That if you're going to have that brilliance, it's a fractured brilliance, I guess. If you can still call it brilliance, if it's fractured. Which is an entirely different thing. And I don't know, maybe this year with these types of cars and the way how this season has gone, it just accentuates his ability to crash and find himself in awkward situations, and with wider cars he can't then be as brash with his overtakes as what he may have been before, and it's just a culmination of a lot of circumstances. But you need to learn to drive around that and adapt. That's the whole thing with Formula One, is that different eras do suit slightly different driving styles, and if you don't adapt, it's that business adjective, adapt or die, isn't it? And he's going to be a thing of that, I think.
I mean, not to repeat ourselves too much, but I mean, I really am racking my brains now to think of comparable drivers, and the only ones I can think of have been paid drivers. People who have a poor finishing record or make sloppy mistakes, but or are overzealous, but they've always retained their seat for a period of time because they were like funding the team in part, and this was more like a a thing in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. You don't
Yeah.
really get that so much anymore.
Andrea de Cesaris is all that's popped into my head.
Yeah, that's one. Who's the other I'm thinking of? Japanese guy.
Ukio Katayama.
Yes.
Or Guru Suzuki
Yukio
used to be
Katayama.
as bad as well.
And I think Toru Takagi had a year like that as well. Ricardo Rosset at Tyrrell.
He
he had
crashed
a
all
very
the time.
respectable. Yeah, he had a very respectable junior Formula record, but I mean, he only kept his seat in the team for the whole season because of the money. And actually, Ken Tyrrell wanted to fire him, but the new owners, BAR, wanted to keep him because it offset. It looked good in the profit loss columns, right? That they've got all the millions he was bringing from Brazil. So yeah, I mean, it's very unusual for a team the size and scale of. I just got a penalty, and deservedly so.
Uh-oh.
I tried to make a move on Bottas, and he closed the door, and I had to move to run off from the track, and it cut the corner.
I've done so much corner cutting. I can't help it.
But yeah, for a team of the competitiveness and prestige, if that's the right word, of Red Bull, it's very unusual. And I mean, that's actually going back to statistics. That is actually a worse record than Palmer.
Yeah. Well, Palmer wasn't necessarily in the wall during the races
No.
so much. And the car did like to break down, and that was a pacey thing. But I don't know. I feel like if this is going to be Verstappen as a defining trait, where he is incredibly fast but incredibly crashy, then he would suit a midfield team better, because on the days where something can be grabbed, he can grab it. And on the days where it's not, he can crash. But you can't then have that kind of issue in a front team.
Bottas is going insanely slowly, but he will not give me any room to get past, and I've nearly lost my wing to him twice again after he took it off and ruined my race on lap one. So I'm very nervous about getting past him, but he's on faster tyres, but he's so slow. And I don't know how to get past him because he's being a real dick when he's defending.
I've had to go mix one on the fuel because I'm so over the fuel efficiency around this track, because I'm a bit trigger happy on the old throttle.
I've got the DRS on him, but that Mercedes unit has got so much grunt that I feel like the DRS is doing almost nothing. And then I nearly run into the back of him in the corners because I seem to have much better brakes. But yeah, this is not going well for me. I'm losing a lot of time behind him. I hope he has to stop again. But while we're talking of Palmer and Ukio Katayama,
Usual suspects.
Can we talk again about McLaren and Stoffel Van Dorn? And we should talk about McLaren's race in general, but
Yeah.
he continues to just underwhelm me completely.
I was underwhelmed this weekend with Van Dorn. He was off the pace all weekend. Alonso has 2 wheels on his wagon and still manages to come through and beat him quite comprehensively. Apparently Van Dorn did have some damage on his car, I believe, as well, but he was like a second off for most of the practice sessions. Generally looking a bit of a state. I was really unimpressed with the whole thing, and that's the first time in a long while where I thought, I'm not happy with you. And it reminds me of the beginning of last year, so I'm hoping that he can kind of turn that around at least a little bit. But Alonso,
Get out of my way, Bottas.
amazing.
Sorry.
That's all right, I can see it.
He's just driving into me repeatedly. And because he got the DRS, he's now getting away from me. Yeah, I thought he was very underwhelming, and I had to say, given that Alonso acquitted himself so well in that race, aside from his stint with only 2 wheels on his wagon, which we said we would talk about, I mean, my heart was in my mouth, actually. I thought he was going to put it into the wall when he came out of that corner. Did you see how much speed he was carrying through?
Yeah, because I was thinking, oh no, and then he hit the wall in the pit lane. And I was like, oh my god.
Bottas, you're killing me, man. You're killing my race. Stop it. Can you see how slow he is through like the corner sections?
A little bit.
Oh, Jesus, for the third race in a row now, you and I are actually in a race situation. At least we're on the same compound of tyres, actually. I'm surprised you're on softs.
I bailed because I was ruining my tyres, and I'm not very good on these at all. Ah, no!
No!
I'll wait for you.
Go, 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 go. Did I take your nose off? Did I swipe you?
No, it was.
I honestly,
that was me. I went in too hot.
I honestly was
Go
not
for
looking
it.
in my mirrors.
That was entirely my fault.
Did you lose your wing?
Nope.
Oh well, that's something at least.
It was beautifully harpooned.
Does Bottas have to stop again?
I think he does.
Good, because he's driving me nuts. And we're going to catch him again very, very quickly.
Oh, I'm really sorry about that.
No worries, mate. Like, no harm done. We're still in the points. And catching Massa, and there's a Ferrari up ahead, so... Yeah, it's had very little effect, actually. If anything, you've probably done me a favour on ultimate race pace, because now I'm not losing time by driving needlessly slowly behind Bottas.
Rotas.
What also came out, though, of the weekend from McLaren is that they've fired Tim Goss, who's been there for about 11 billion years.
Yeah, I'd missed this news article entirely because of their qualifying dramas or something. Was how it was phrased. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, apparently the chassis is just a bit crap. And that's extra embarrassing given they've spent 2 years talking about how they've potentially got the best chassis on the grid. For me now, that's a team that's really in crisis, and I stand by my assessment that they shouldn't have dropped Honda. Oh, I've gone wide. You got by on merit there.
I was worried.
But I'm coming for you.
Uh-oh.
Oh, almost lost it. I'm going to switch to the Ultras.
Ooh.
Because there's just no grip on these tyres.
These softs aren't very good. I was going to do super softs, but I was just going through the ultras so quickly, as I did through the super softs. To be fair, I was doing like 5% a lap.
I might see how the rest of the race pans out, but there's 12 laps to go. If I can stay on these for like another 2 laps, it might actually be to my benefit to switch to the ultras. And there's going to be a lot of people like face palming and saying no, don't do it. But really, because I've had a few races like this in career mode where you sort of feel like you're not driving to your full potential and maybe running into a bit of traffic. And it's particularly Bottas that I'm bothered about, because he's been a rolling roadblock for me the entire Grand Prix. That if he's moving on to softs now, that maybe I can get by him, because we were about even on pace before he pitted. As long as I've gained enough time since he came in, I should still be able to come out ahead of him, or at least racing him on exit, and then Bob's your uncle.
Fanny's that
assuming
hard.
you have an Uncle Bob.
Do down. Yeah, I'm very confused about McLaren. It was they shouldn't have talked it up. And they shouldn't have done a lot of things, I think, this season. And by God, is Alonso finally paying that money Bottas in this lap?
Thank Christ for that.
And yeah, now really more than ever, I think Alonso is earning his money and showing the class that Van Dorn needs to start pulling out again, because that was one of his, if not the most disappointing race I've seen from him in his F1 career so far. So yeah, sort it out, Stoff. Especially since Lando Norris is busy doing well.
They just seem like they're going to be a bit rudderless, because I honestly think Nando's gearing up to move. Did you see he was fastest in practice in WEC today?
Oh no, I've not had a look yet. All I know is that Pietro Fittipaldi broke both his legs at Eau Rouge. That's the same thing.
He's he's walked into a seat at Toyota, which is now basically uncontested for the championship. So
he's going to win anyway.
Yeah, he's going to win anyway. But yeah, he topped the timesheets immediately. And you sort of think, well, what would you rather do?
Yeah. I mean, he does like an underdog, or at least a battle. So I hope he's not going to kind of just swan around like a minute ahead of everyone, because I think he'll get bored with that. But so yeah, he needs to be kept on his toes a little bit, I think, to be interested.
You are so much faster everyone's faster than me out of that final corner. I don't know what I'm doing with the line I'm taking, but it is not working for me at all. Oh, that was very... You preempted what I was going to do there. That was very smart.
I didn't look. I could see that one coming though.
Yeah, I telegraphed that a million miles away. But you're coming back. No. I came in too hot. I came in too hot. God damn it.
F1 will resume after we've stopped squealing.
We just can't be trusted to race each... Oh, no!
No!
Oh, I've lost my front wing. But now I can try my ultra strategy at least.
That might not be the most effective way to have done it, though, but yay.
No, it was my own fault. I knew the car didn't have the grip, and I just tried to follow you through, and it'd been giving me the signal all the way through, but we just had our own Verstappen Ricciardo moment there.
We did. We've had two now. Whew.
The main thing is I'm not out of the race, which is what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, I was a bit worried when I saw you going to the barrier. I was like,
Apparently my ultras are scrubbed.
See, now that's why because I was originally going to go ultra, super soft, ultra, and when it told me I was 12 seconds a lap, I was going to be 12 seconds slower doing that strategy. I was like, I don't see why, and then I thought, I wonder if it's not realised that I've got fresh sets, because that's what this game needs to sort out, is its tyre allocation, so that it knows when you've got fresh sets and scrubbed sets instead of just assuming, because it picks the wrong ones. Okay,
well now I get to battle through the field, because I come out in 18th, but everyone's on softs, and I'm on basically new ultras.
Cool. Good for the replay. Can we talk Force India and podium?
Yes, we definitely should, because we're not far away from the end, and we spent a lot of time on Verstappen. So yes, let us do that. What was your make of that? Because there's a lot of dissenting opinion about that, about whether it was really on merit, whether they've turned a corner, or it's just track specific. I
don't think they've turned a corner. I still think that they've got a long way to go, and to be fair, Perez was saying that as well. I think it's very track specific, but I'm really pleased that they've had that, and that they've had some kind of success to boost that forward, because that will do as much for their morale as much as anything else, to try and put them back in the frame of, yeah, we're on our way up and we're doing stuff, because they did seem to take a step forward. But yeah, I'm really, really pleased that Perez does his usual cheeky podium once a year, and I found it really interesting. Ocon's second ever retirement basically probably cost him that podium instead, because but he was busy driving into people and driving like Raikkonen wasn't there. So for me, the blame for that incident was at least 75% Ocon's fault.
Yeah, I didn't have much sympathy for him actually when he went out. And he's one of those other drivers actually that it's a very important season for him actually.
Yeah.
Hi, whoever that was.
I'll tell you when I get onto the straight. XD apparently.
Bist du Deutsch?
Oh, it's a German. Bist du Deutsch?
9. I just don't know what to make of Ocon's season actually, because I don't feel like I've seen much of him on track. It seems to me that he's got a lot to do this year, given the precariousness of Bottas's position.
Because he's a natural fit to look to, so he needs to show that he is at least on par with Perez, if not beating where possible. And he's there or thereabouts, but it's that podium. If at the end of the season they've spent every other one of the races side by side on merit in performance and pace and maybe points, everyone's going to remember the podium.
Very, very true. Very, very true. But I mean, that said, we shouldn't, I suppose, detract from the fact that actually it's also a very important season for Perez, and who even knows what's going to happen to him.
Do you think he'll attract anything from the top teams?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like he deserves a shot, but he would be a Brendan Hartley. He would be a butt plug. It would be a stopgap solution while some young talent is developed. And given how Kimi Raikkonen is driving right now, I actually thought he might, if Ricciardo stays at Red Bull, I thought he might slip in at Ferrari as like a 1 to 2 year stopgap while they, figure out what to do with Leclerc or Giovinazzi, or they find another more long-term replacement, because he's kind of inoffensive. He's good enough and got the pace and he'll bring it home, but he's not someone Vettel's going to freak out about. He kind of struck me as like a good stopgap solution, but now I don't actually know what's going to happen with Perez.
Very difficult, very difficult. But it is good to see the Pink Panthers back on the old podium and looking a little bit more like the 2017 selves, of which I will take more of that in the midfield merry-go-round.
Absolutely. It's always entertaining when stuff goes awry. Shall we talk race winners, given that we're 5 laps from the end?
Oh, yes. And then we can end on a Sauber. That would be great.
Yes, because we definitely have to talk about our beloved Sauber as well. So, I have to say, 10 out of 10 for surprises in this Grand Prix. Very much like China, actually, where anyone could have won it. My heart literally bled for Bottas. I felt, and he needed that result as well. That would have put him right back into the championship. And I actually, though, I feel he will, within the team, get the credit he deserved for that drive, because, I mean, that was, to my mind, if he'd won it, it was a traditional F1 win. He did it by sticking to his strategy and driving it well, rather than through, ballsy moves and aggression. So, I definitely feel like he's earned some kudos with that drive, and seeing Toto's reaction to his puncture, I feel like the team genuinely has some sympathy for him. I don't know if he's done enough to secure his drive.
No.
I'm really not convinced about that. But occasionally he does sort of drive to a standard that says, well, he's a safe pair of hands there. So I did feel really bad for him, because, it was not his fault at all, and I was surprised how humble Lewis was, actually.
Yeah, and I think
in inheriting that win.
I think he was humble because he was in one of his Mizok moods, where even though he won the race, he felt like everything in the world shouldn't have happened for him, and woe is me, end of days. You know, the usual Hamilton when you're having a bad day. And actually that worked to his credit, I think, for once, because that then meant that he was having #blessed for someone else for once, which was nice. And he appreciated that actually some days you can be lucky and it come back to you, not being bitchy about why someone else's safety car has leapfrogged you and that kind of stuff. So I think he feels that win is payback for Melbourne, and I think that then sends out a warning sign to Vettel and co, because now that he feels like the world has course corrected, he'll come back, I think, a bit more mentally in the game. And that's a worry for everyone.
Although, to be honest, I just don't think the car is working for him right now. Paul Charlesley, the racing driver who's on one of the F1 podcasts I very much enjoy, he was saying, like, if you watch on boards with Lewis, you can see he's very hesitant on turning with that car. And it was something Gary Anderson noticed in pre-season testing as well, that the front end of the Mercedes does not look very good. It tends to wash out in long corners, and the drivers look hesitant about turning in. Okay. And it was like a second guess kind of thing, soaring at the wheel a little bit. So he turns incrementally to see how the car is feeling, and then commits to the corner afterwards. And like over the course of a Grand Prix, turn after turn after turn, that's going to cost you a lot of pace. And he just seems nowhere right now. And normally I would say it's all down to his mentality, but this time I'm not entirely sure it's the case. I think there is an inherent problem with the Mercedes, and I don't know if they can develop the way out of it quick enough, because the difference between them and how good the Ferrari looks in corners is remarkable. And as we said at the outset of the episode, I'm not entirely convinced that they would just voluntarily stop using party mode, and given what an advantage party mode seems to be, they must be losing a lot of time in the corners. A lot of time.
I think what will be really interesting, you referencing whether they can develop themselves out of that corner, and they talk about it actually. Have you seen on the Mercedes F1 channel where they do like a post-race debrief and they answer people's questions and so on? The latest one about Azerbaijan, the first question was basically, are you sure it's not your car? It's not the tyres that are the divas, not the car. So it's like slightly positioned in a way so that they don't answer like your car's a bit one-directional. But they're like, yeah, because it has to be in a certain window, and because it was cold, we couldn't get the tyres up to this, blah, blah, blah. But if you read between the lines, the car is a diva, and it's not great.
Well, I mean, it's like that only holds up if you were racing yourself.
Yeah.
Because every other team almost was able to get the tyres working acceptably. Mm-hmm. So saying, well, we were slow because of the tyres, well, that just means, it's a standard tyre.
Yeah.
It's homologated. So if everyone else can get them working but you, that's not an excuse. That doesn't get your car out of critique.
No.
In fact, quite the opposite. It's a direct inference that there's a deficiency in your machinery.
Exactly.
Whether that's setup related or just a problem with the car. I mean, they've got a suspension concept, particularly around the front, that maybe that's a factor. I don't know. It's one Toro Rosso copied, and they don't seem to have quite the same. Well, actually, maybe they do, because the engine can't be that bad, I suppose. Given that they've been able to get a very solid and respectable result, so. Don't know. That's what I love about this season. Everything's just so hard to read into.
It is. But just to finish off on the point there, was that if they can't outdevelop themselves, Hamilton's ability to drive around a problem will be entirely down to his mentality, I think. And his mentality is going to have such an even bigger part, I think, on this season if they can't develop themselves out of it, because I think at the moment Bottas can drive around a problem slightly better than Hamilton, because he's less directionally focused in I must win, and if I'm not winning, woe is me, blah 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 blah. And if it continues like that, I worry for Hamilton. Well, I don't worry at all, but I'm concerned that Hamilton will actually have a stinker of a year, because mentally he will not be able to see his way out of the paper bag.
Very, very true. I think that's a very, very good observation, actually. Bottas is holding up Massa.
Wow.
He's been so slow this Grand Prix. I really don't know what's going on for him.
Maybe
I could technically dive through for 9th, but it would do nothing because I've got a 3-second time penalty.
I've seen you coming over
But
the line there. Good recovery.
But I have recovered quite nicely. Like another lap, and I could have maybe done it. No points this Grand Prix, but I mean I don't mind so much because there was some good racing between us actually, and it was my own fault that I crashed. I keep forgetting that when you follow cars, you lose aero grip, and you really do. Like the whole way you drive is different. And on those tyres, I'd felt that there was no grip through the fast corners in Sector 2, and I still like foot to the floor, have to catch Simon, and then just lost it. So it was my own fault.
Watch back our little battle. I'm quite pleased with my little wee overtake because it could have gone horribly wrong. And
you
like the first
did
one.
good.
Whew.
You did good.
It did cost me third in the race though.
Yeah.
I would have because we was ahead of Raikkonen and I couldn't get him back. And then I could have held him up with crap tyres, but I can't catch at all. So
that's interesting. That I got past Hockenberg the lap before and had enough pace to pull out 3 seconds on him to not be affected by my penalty. So
good go.
I think another lap or two, and I could have been in the points.
Hey.
I could have snatched 9th at least. I think.
Definitely.
Hey ho, eh? Let's finish up then with a bit of Sauber speak.
Yes.
Because obviously all the plaudits go to Mr. Leclerc, but I need to speak in defence of the Merrickson very quickly.
We had a broken car, didn't he, after turn 2?
And he still finished less than half a second out of the points. Mm-hmm. And he would have finished in the points with an extra lap. So given the race he had, that was not only a hell of a recovery drive, but he still had pace. He had pace. He just... He made a fluff up and he paid for it. But I still think that could have been a double points finish for Sauber.
Yeah. Unfortunate
very
with that clout. But no, I think he done all right. I think Leclerc was really interesting, and there's an article where he talks about actually that and it's something that you've mentioned quite a few times in previous podcasts, where the junior Formula E is training for a Formula One that doesn't exist anymore, and it needed to all realign. And Charles was basically saying that, where he said, all of my junior Formula E, I've driven in certain styles, came to F1, my style does not work for Formula One. And so I've been busy working to change my entire driving style to suit Formula One. And this is the first time where I felt like I came as a Formula One driver, driving like a Formula One driver should in a Formula One car. Ta-da! So I find that really interesting, and again backs up things that we've been saying for a very long time.
I mean that actually, I think that is the exact sort of attitude that's going to serve him very well in his career.
Yeah.
The ability to say, I'm not getting results and it's down to me, which is so surprisingly rare.
Yeah.
In Formula One, like amongst drivers, it's scary actually how some of them are completely
blinkered,
like completely unwilling to accept responsibility for elements of their own driving. And the fact they come up with insane excuses such as the ghost of Marcus Ericsson yet to come crash me out.
The ghost of there's a meme waiting to happen.
So for him to be able to honestly reflect on his performance and say, do you know what, I didn't quite get my head around it so far, but hopefully I can get on top of it, and then to actually make that happen, yeah, props to him. I have to give him credit there. And I've been maybe a little harsh on him in the lead up to this race because I guess I have really high expectations for him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's shut me up a little bit, and I'm pleased that he did. Because I mean, something I should always point out as well, like when I criticize a team or a driver, it's not because I want to. I don't always enjoy it. I mean, with Roman Grosjean, maybe a bit, but in general, like and we're always harsh on Verstappen. I keep saying to people who like write me messages on Twitter and stuff, it's like I take no joy from having to criticize him because he should be the talent of a generation.
Yeah.
But if I don't criticize him, then what's the point in making a podcast? There's a million blog posts where people are kissing his arse, but like if you're going to commentate on the sport, you should commentate on the sport. And you know, if he was driving amazingly, I would credit him for it. And so I feel I was justified in being a little bit harsh on Leclerc given his performance in the first 4 seasons, and his tendency to spin was a little unnerving. But the fact that he's got a handle on it and he's got a good head on his shoulders, I think that's so important for a driver that's been brought in so young as well. That's really going to pay dividends.
Yeah, interesting you say about the spinning actually, because throughout most of that race, I was having an Adrian Sutil flashback to having some kind of Monaco hit or something like that, and Errant Kimi just flies in from above. Or something because he'd spun in Australia in qualifying, Bahrain in qualifying, China in the race, and you're like, don't make it 4 out of 4. Don't make it 4 out of 4. So no, I'm glad that hopefully that is the turning of a corner. And
exactly how I felt about Gasly when he got his 4th. All the way through, I was expecting him to fluff it any minute.
So yeah, interesting. And bringing it to our own personal little battles here.
It's getting a little close.
It has. It's got juicy with 2 to go, 3 to go. 2 to go.
2 to go. Brazil and Abu Dhabi.
Ooh, Abu Dhabi.
And I didn't actually expect that you and I would be racing so closely in Mexico, because I either expected to have an accident like I did in the fast corners, or for one of us to just completely pound the other. But I really had a strong feeling that in Brazil we'd be racing most of the Grand Prix.
I've got a similar feeling.
Because I've watched back some Brazilian Grand Prix from like your solo career modes and ones we've done together in the past. Because sometimes, you know, I've been working a lot in the office, sometimes like a process runs, so I maybe watch back a video a little bit, and I actually think we're going to be really close in Brazil. Ooh. That'll be the decider about who comes out on top, I think, more than Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
Because I think we're very comparable on pace in Brazil. So that's exciting, and you know, given where everyone else is in the championship, it's the closest battle.
Yeah.
Oh no, Ricardo and Perez actually are a little bit cozier, but otherwise, yeah, and we're safe in the constructors, so I don't think Gene will be too upset.
No, Gene will be happy with that.
So yeah, an enjoyable session and a great race to review. Actually, I quite enjoyed our discussion there. I mean, it wasn't all race focused, but it was good stuff, man.
Exactly.
I think breaking down like the Verstappen-Ricciardo relationship never gets old for me.
No, because there's so much to break down, and it will continue to break down for many more races to come. I'm sure of that. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for taking the time to come and watch us. We will be live in 2 weeks' time, which has just dawned on me. I'm at Fruxton, so we can't do Saturday, but we'll organise that.
We'll do another Friday, I guess.
Yeah. It's dawned on me. Once we've had, is it Barcelona next, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It's real F1 is Spain, and for us it's Brazil.
Yeah. So we'll be reviewing the Spanish Grand Prix in F1 terms, whilst dicing on the Brazilian circuit. All of the Latin, Spanish, paella flavour. Thanks for watching. You guys take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
This house is